Your funnel is lying to you. Your funnel, or specifically your marketing funnel, is supposed to be your definitive guide for how leads eventually become customers. But what if that map is not a true representation of how things are and how things work in the real world? What if there were certain assumptions or biases at play when it was conceived and codified? And have you ever challenged yourself to find discrepancies in it? Now, according to the latest research, where 2.5% conversion rates on content-driven funnels are the average, marketers who take a critical assessment of how their funnels are working see those conversion rates up to around the 35% mark. So this week on the show, we'll be looking into and finding out about what it is that you need to set about reconsidering and questioning to help increase your funnel's performance. Essentially, we're talking about conducting an MOT of the customer generation machine for which you're responsible. Hello and good afternoon. My name's James Rostance and this is the 414 live and exclusive to LinkedIn Live this Thursday afternoon, the 11th of March. So if you're a professional B2B marketer, whether you work in-house at a company or if you work at an agency, or indeed if you are a company executive with a hands-on role in your company's sales and marketing endeavors, the 414 is for you. And that's because each and every week I interview some of the greatest and most interesting minds in B2B marketing so that you can directly expand and enhance your professional knowledge with every single episode. And this week is no different because this week, as I mentioned, we're going to be diving right into funnels, funnel management, updating, creation, all of these wonderful things so that you can ultimately deliver more qualified leads to your business. But before we get into that, an important feature of the show, which we're doing each and every week from now on, new friends and subscribers to the show. Yes. Subscribing to the show to make sure they don't miss out an episode any week is at the414.net. Joining us as official friends of the show from now on, in this order, Kelly Clayton, Russ Powell, Charlotte Attlee, Anders Thim, Lisa Target, Richie Anderson, Edward Stevenson, Dermot Murphy, Laura Quelch, Sally Bain, and Paul Simon Mackey. Not forgetting Rachel Holmes, Ann Timmins. There we go. Thank you for joining. Thank you for subscribing. And if you haven't already, then it's the414.net for all subscription options and previous episodes dating back to episode number 1. Right. So here we go then. So we're going to be talking all about marketing funnels today. And this is a rather special episode because joining me live all the way from Cape Town in actual South Africa, please welcome Mr. Eben Meyer. Eben, good afternoon, sir.
Hello, good afternoon. How are you today, James?
Really good. I'm excited to have someone from a completely different continent and in the rather sunny part of the world. Yes, so Cape Town, what's that like?
Well, you just caught me staring out the window because it's fairly sunny Cape Town. It is. We're in the middle of a cold front at the moment, actually. But for the most part, we can't complain. Very nice weather.
To put that in context, what's a cold front in Cape Town scale of warmth?
I'm going to embarrass myself. It's, 15 degrees is cold for us. Celsius, yeah.
Okay, that's not too bad.
That's a very... No, and we like to complain about the weather, it's for sure. But once you've had a UK winter...
Well, exactly, and your close ties to the UK is why you keep a finger on the pulse with the weather, because drinking tea and the weather is two things we hold very close to our heart, isn't it? So, right.
That's what I hear.
Well, hey, thanks so much for joining, and you know what? Let's kick straight into it. So, could I start then by asking you to could you clarify what exactly is a funnel as it's currently understood?
Okay, straight into it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, there are different kinds of funnels. I think we've seen that change a little bit over the years. But I'd say, the most reasonable explanation to start with is that it's a way to visualize the flow of potential customers into current customers. And, most funnels are going to actually go beyond that point, and they're going to show you what's happening at the retention phase, at later upselling phases as well. But, there are different kinds of funnels, and you'll hear them go by many names. There'll be a marketing funnel, fine. There'll be a sales funnel, purchasing funnel, buying funnel. They go by many other names, but over the years, these have kind of morphed into what we're seeing as a more cohesive buyer journey now, right? Because for the buyer, there is no marketing or sales funnel. It's just one journey. And
yes.
Yeah, and I think that's a good step in the right direction. I think we're definitely taking a better approach to this. But you'll also hear about conversion funnels. So there's like all kinds, I think, to think about here. In e-commerce, you're much more likely to hear about a conversion funnel, and that's a more transactionally focused journey. That's much more about what they're buying on your site. So yeah, I think the idea really with a funnel is, we want to visualize, we want to map this journey that our buyers are taking. We want to understand it. And obviously the reason for that is, what you can measure, what you can understand, you can improve. And that's the idea, I'd say.
Lovely. When you were describing all the different names for a funnel then, the image that came to mind is almost like an FBI wanted poster, also known as this, also known as that, and also known as this. But ultimately, what would be a good way of describing a funnel in real terms so that we can dispel any ambiguity whatsoever?
Okay. Well, look, it's about the buyer's decision-making journey, right? They might know nothing about their problem, which puts them at the awareness phase. They might then start learning about the the different challenges that are surrounding their problem, and they'll start considering solutions to that. And as they move through this decision-making journey, they eventually end up at a purchase. That's ultimately all this is about. And I think the most accurate way to see it, or the best way to see it, is as a buying funnel. This is a buyer's journey. As sellers, all we are trying to do is help them do so.
Perfect. All right. Well, with that nicely clarified then, let's move on to the business at hand. So what exactly is it that you see as being wrong with funnels right now?
Yeah, I mean, funnels are all right. Let's let me say, okay, there's not a smear campaign against them, but I definitely think we need to be a little bit critical about them. So what's wrong with funnels? Yeah, I don't think they're intrinsically wrong, but they're sending us a couple of misleading signals about B2B buying, right? And there's a bit of an issue in the interpretation. I think the best example of this is something that all funnels have in common, which is that they're showing us a progression of buying steps, one after the other, whether that is awareness, consideration, decision, or a more nuanced version of that. The big thing they have in common is that they're all showing this happen in steps, sequentially. And that's just not anything like reality. And I mean, just to give an idea of why this is so important is really to do with B2B buying reality. So, today, if you're going to put yourself in the shoes of your buyers, they're not moving through steps, one piece of information at a time. They're actually doing a very complicated hot mess loop, running between the people on their buying committee. They're fetching information, they're validating that, and they're completing this process over and over again because there's always new information coming in. And if you look at the leading research, they back this up, and they find that customers are actually finding it very hard to buy. It's prohibitively difficult for them to buy. In fact, they're getting to the end of the decision-making time frame, and they're just choosing the safest option on the table because it's so difficult for them to move forward. Now, when we're marketers and we're looking at a funnel, we see these really easy demarcated sections, and we think to ourselves, oh, okay, well, they're not moving through the consideration phase. Maybe I should throw more consideration phase content at them, and that will solve their problem. But this is the big disconnect, because the problem with buyers is really not a lack of information. It's actually an oversupply of information. And what we are doing most of the time is we're throwing more information at them, and this is actually making their jobs harder, which, if we have some empathy, it's a really hard job to begin with. I actually have a note here because I wanted to remember this stat. I really like this one.
Yeah.
The leading reason why customers have limited engagement with B2B companies, so the reason why they'll be withdrawing from an engagement, is because marketers are sending them too much irrelevant content. That's 34% of the time. That's from Forrester. So yeah, we think that what we should be doing as marketers is enabling buyers with more content, and that's just because we don't really understand what they're struggling with. And funnels are partly to blame for this.
Right. Okay. You're reminding me of the adage: a confused mind always says no." And what you're describing here is by just chucking more of the same type of content. It sounds like is what's adding to that confusion. Is that what's going on, and that's the problem?
Yeah, I think so. And if you're in a certain stage where we know someone is in consideration stage, we know that they're considering maybe even different kinds of solutions. Definitely, they are considering which tools out there can solve the problem that they have. When they're stuck there, we take it to mean that they haven't moved to decision phase. But really, what's happening is buyers are doing 70% of their research before even speaking to you. They've already been to the decision phase. We're looking at these funnel stages. They're a little bit outdated, and what we're not realizing is when buyers are getting stuck these days, they're getting stuck because they can't tick off their buying checklist. And if you look at the research from Gartner, you can actually see in quite a lot of detail like what is this buying checklist and what does it entail. And these are the blockers. These are the hurdles that they can't get past. And we wouldn't really know that by looking at an oversimplified map of reality.
Sure. And when you're saying a simplified map of reality, we're talking about, and I know you can't see me right now, but a traditional funnel, a funnel shape is how these things are interpreted. So before we dig into this further, can I ask, how do you think that these problems came about then?
Right. So how is the funnel out of sync with reality?
Yeah, basically, yeah. So what's ultimately leading to these buyers saying no and freaking out because they're having marketers chuck so much stuff at them that they're then unable to make a purchase decision?
Yeah. Well, I think it really comes down to what we think that we're doing the right thing, because the picture that we're looking at, it all makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I think really what we need to understand is why is what we are looking at so different from reality, because as long as we are building funnels, and we need funnels here, like there's no, how can you do marketing without a funnel, and how can you plan a journey without a funnel? So until we understand why these representations of the buyer's journey are inaccurate, I don't think we can necessarily get better at it. And I would say the main main challenge here is really just we need to simplify things. To go back to the maps on the mind, to go back to the map analogy, right? If a funnel is a map of the buyer's journey, it has to do the same thing that every other map has to do, which is to simplify reality. So it takes this very complex, nuanced, spaghetti bowl mess of decision-making jobs that Gartner describes, and it puts it into a oversimplified version. And of course, this makes it more practical, because now all of a sudden we can see we have conversions funnel stages, we have predictable inputs and outputs, and as marketers with budgets, we can actually start planning, what's going to come out of our funnel at the end of month 1, at the end of month 2, and we can make sure that sales is happy, so we can do these kinds of things. But of course, we lose the detail in the process. And I think the challenge with losing that detail is now we don't know exactly what it is that's keeping them stuck. So to go back to it, I think that's the one part. But that's not the whole picture. The second part of this is we will always have a bias when we are trying to understand what our buyers are doing, because we are not our buyers, and we are pretty bad with empathy. Like if you look at the track record of the kinds of content that we're building in the industry, it's often not really speaking to them. It's just speaking from our organization, and we build these tools, these funnels, to do a very specific job, and that is build a predictable machine that's going to give us leads every single month. It's going to give us revenue attribution. It's going to make our jobs successful. And nowhere in building these things do we ask the question, what's going to make the buyer's life successful? And that is the challenge with the funnel. Is it's a tool built for us, and we need to be thinking of it more like, how would this tool help the buyer if the buyer was stuck inside of it?
I think that's a revelation type point that you've just covered right there about seeing it from the buyer's point of view. So, this leads on to my next question, actually. So what would be a better way of looking at the problem, and basically, how do you solve that then?
Well, the easy and the hard answer at the same time is just spend more time in the shoes of your buyer. It's obviously hard to do because they live in a different world to us. But yeah, a good question to ask would be, what is it like to buy my product? And what is it like to convince a group of people, each with their own risks that they're trying to avoid, what is it like to convince them to buy this product and to make the investment that's needed? And what are some of the roadblocks that I might encounter if I were to do so? So that's that's a really good way to look at it. It's not an easy way to look at it, but I would highly recommend let's look at the research that we're getting from customer surveys and from customer interviews, and let's see what's actually happening. And I mean, this is even if we have time, we can even look at it now. It's I think it's fascinating to see. We in an average buying job, it's a very simple exercise actually. We're trying to figure out what the problem is. That's the first step. You want to make sure there's a reason to buy, and then you want to look at some solutions that exist for that, right? And with that, you then go on to find the requirements that you need to solve this problem that you have, and then eventually you get that validation for the vendor that you're looking for. So you've got this whole, you've got the selection of basically 4 buying jobs that need to be ticked off. The problem, the solutions, the requirements, and then eventually the vendors. And that's not a big deal. I think we can all see how that would happen, and we can all imagine that going through. But really where things get complicated is when you start adding on these additional people in the party. And you can imagine, okay, making a decision for just myself, super quick, super easy. Trying to convince 6 senior managers to do the same thing with me, it's going to be very hard. So that's the first step of looking at it differently, I think, is to imagine that group scenario and imagine herding cats, basically. Imagine herding a bunch of people that have their own agendas, they have their own requirements, they have their own jobs with their own metrics that they're measured on. And you got to keep them happy with this purchase as well. Businesses are fairly rational, but they're not 100% rational. And so people act in strange ways. Now, if you have to convince it, yeah, I think so, right?
Yeah.
I've seen some strange things.
I was just letting the mental picture of herding cats settle in right there. So just that we're completely clear, you're talking about basically communicating with all people with influence in the purchase decision as part of a group buying activity. And what I'm getting from this so far is that it would be a mistake to be thinking of just a single person, so a singular customer avatar, where in actual fact, it sounded like you were saying that you do indeed need to have several avatars of different buyers within the group, but successfully orchestrating that could be likened to herding cats. Is that pretty much on the money?
I like that, yeah. I would say so.
Right, nice.
And I mean, of course, that's not new to your listeners. We all know about the big buying groups. But this is definitely something that's useful when you're thinking, how can I move someone to the next stage of the funnel? It's not about them. It's about them and the group that they're attached to. What is my content doing to speak to the group around them, and what is it doing to basically raise the concerns that these buyers are going to be having on their shoulders anyway, from the buying group. So that is a useful way to think about it, I think. And then there's another element, which is actually gaining traction. So the buying groups have been growing over time, but another thing that's been growing over time is the absolute abundance of information. There's way too much information in the world right now, more than we can consume anyway, right? We haven't figured out how to consume the choice that we have now. And that's really taking its toll on decision making. We're paralyzed with options. When I go to a restaurant with 20 wines on the menu, I freeze up. I don't know. I want all the wines. So really what we need is we need to give buyers a short list. We need to give them an easier way to choose options, and we need to guide them through that, because when they're looking at hundreds of choices, it's really paralyzing.
Analysis paralysis, or paralysis by analysis, right?
Yeah.
And that's not a good thing. Okay, so it's a. Sorry, but That was me not putting my phone on Do Not Disturb. Fantastic.
Oh, it's a good reminder, actually.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh, I should say hello, by the way, to Laura Quelch. She said that she's been looking forward to this. So hello, Laura. Thank you very much. I would put your name on screen, but it just says LinkedIn user. Don't worry, that's not your bad. It's the software's. But hello, nonetheless, Laura. Good afternoon. All right. So. With regard to creating the right content, so does it come down to having a better defined, series of profiles of avatars? Is that one of the key elements of sorting this blockage in the funnel out, if a blockage is the right way to describe it?
That's a good question. I mean, avatars or persona profiles or whatever you call them, they're very useful, but they're also quite problematic, right? I mean, you've probably seen those wishy-washy, those fluffy profiles, where you now know how many dogs somebody has, and whatever tea the IT director enjoys for some reason, and somehow this will play into a good piece of content. So while avoiding those kinds of pitfalls that exist with avatars, I think it's brilliant. But this is obviously nothing new to anyone. We all know about this. We've all been building the best customer research we can build. I think what's more prevalent than it was before is building content not for the individual, but for the group of individuals that perform together in a buying decision. So I think that is something. Often we write a piece of content for one professional, and that makes it very hard for that individual to share the content around the buying group. And actually, what we need something that is relevant to everyone on the committee, and it actually ties together the things that make it relevant to them. So when they read that, they can think, oh yeah, this makes sense to me, but it also makes sense to my financial director. I can just hear them saying amen, when they talk about the total cost of operations going down. And you can kind of see in a buying group how you can make that easier for them to agree on one solution. But that's only when you're able to think of the multiple stakeholders that are reading it.
Understood. Okay. At this point, Eben, would you mind if I throw a question at you live on the show? Is that okay?
Cool.
Yeah. Right. So Gamdan's with us this afternoon. He asks, can we call a funnel a strategy or process to achieve the business goals? That's what he asks.
I think it's definitely a process. I guess this is semantics now, and I like semantics, but I'm not sure about this. But I think probably you'd want a strategy to use a funnel. You want your strategy to be something that it has a great significance. Beyond however somebody is moving through to the path to purchase. Mm-hmm. And then I suppose your funnel is such an important part of the process that you would center it on that. I'm not sure. Is that question sort of around? Should we be building our strategies on funnels, or am I misunderstanding that?
I think it was more direct. So it's can we call a funnel a strategy or process to achieve a business goal?
Yeah,
I realise I've just repeated the question there, but sometimes repeating these things helps so that you can ultimately give the definitive answer.
I needed that. Thank you.
All right. So it sounds like that was ultimately a yes, right?
Yeah, I would be careful not to replace strategy with a funnel, because I think it is so simplified, and it is such a it's such a specific tool. It's a tool we use to predict demand generation, really. So yeah, there are all kinds of factors that we can never account for in a funnel. There's all kinds of qualitative factors, and it would be a shame for them to be ignored because we put too much importance on them. And you can probably tell already from my general stance that I always think we should take bags of salt on board with our funnels.
Did you say bags of salt?
Yeah, bags and bags.
Right. I'm with you. Right. Yes. So testing everything and not running with an assumption for too long. Cool. Okay. Well, so what would you say are the steps which marketers need to take then to sort out? And I really like using the term blockage here with the funnel, because I think that fits with the whole visual picture. So what are the steps that marketers, from your perspective, need to do to fix this?
Okay, Great question. Hard question. I'm definitely not the funnel whisperer, by the way. I'm just gonna put that disclaimer out there. But I think one of the most valuable parts to start with is acknowledging the fact that they're not actually stuck in our funnel. They're talking to many suppliers. They're talking to many vendors. We are one of the we're one of the many touch points in their engagement. So when we think that they're stuck in our content journey, really what's happening is they're stuck in a world of content, and our content might only be taking up, 5% if you're lucky of their time. And that's a reality we need to acknowledge when we look at these buyers that are not moving forward. And once we know that, then we can also act a little bit more empathetically. So knowing that, we know that they have lots of information in front of them, too much information. And so I think the first step is to try and vet ourselves, to fireproof our content so it is really, really relevant. And I've got like a little checklist that I've been using. It makes it easier for me. I can share that with you guys. But
yes,
it's basically, ask the first question: is this absolutely relevant? Because when you're a buyer, you're a buyer with all these vendors chucking their content at you, just asking you to look at them, asking you to read the next white paper, read the next ebook. They're inundated, and I like to think of it as like a pile, really, really high pile, and you want to make sure your content's at the top of the pile. But what's going to keep it at the top is its usefulness to the buying process, which we've seen is like cat herding, right? So first question is it relevant to this cat herding process, right? Is this actually relating to the completion of a buying job? Is this an important job as well? So, is the goal of this content to help them move forward and to tick off the requirements box or tick off the solutions box? And if it is doing so, then let's make sure that is one that they're actually struggling with. And we can figure that out with customer interviews and with talking to our customers. But that's the most important thing. So, is it solving a buying job? Gartner's listed 4 buying jobs. And these are the ones that we spoke about earlier, right?
Yep.
But those are not the only 4. You also have 2 jobs on top of that, and that is gathering the consensus of those first buying jobs and then validating and updating all new information. So as content lands on their laps, their job is to actually validate that content. And the easier you can make that for them to do, the more likely it is that your content is going to stay on the top of the pile as that most useful reference for them as they're navigating this spaghetti mess, right? And okay, so that's the first question, right? Is it relevant? Is it relevant in terms of a buying job? Is it relevant in terms of where they're consistently struggling? The second point is it actually effective in doing this? So good checkers for this are, is it clear? Is it simple? Is it informative? There's so much knowledge we can share at all times, and the question is, do these buyers really need that knowledge at that time? Is this really knowledge that's going to make their lives easier and make their decision a better one? And oftentimes, I think the answer is just no. And if the answer is no, it's better to leave that out. It's difficult to do because we all want to have our voices heard. And then, is the content easy for the customer to use quickly and effectively? It must feel like a reference for them when they're making this purchasing decision, one that they can easily get everyone else on board with. And does it inform them of important differentiators between suppliers? This is also one of the things that makes buying really hard, right? Is everyone is the same. In highly competitive markets, all vendors seem to be doing the same thing with different skins on it. And if you can make it very easy for them to tell the difference between yourself, supply number 2, supply number 3, and you can highlight those differences for them, you've just guided their thinking in a very easy way. And they're going to really appreciate that, and they're going to refer back to your content because of that. And then there's one more.
Yep.
Is it shareable? And I think this goes back to the topic of like, how big is the buying group? So it's only shareable if it is credible. So given the fact that these buyers are surrounded by many, many suppliers, all the suppliers are throwing information at the buyers, right? You need to make sure that as the seller, you are the credible one among them. So you should acknowledge that there are other suppliers. You should acknowledge that there are many choices on the table for this buyer, and that you are giving them recommendations that are agnostic of that. Giving them recommendations saying, well, actually we're not the best fit for these reasons, but we are definitely the best fit for these reasons. And when you're honest about that, you will gain credibility, and that's going to make a document like this very shareable among stakeholders. And then, of course, it has to be relevant to the majority, and it has to be shareable among them as well. So this, make sure the content is something that can travel. If it travels, it's more likely to do its job well. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you very much. Okay. One thing that occurred to me then when you were running through those is how do you know when to get specific pieces of content in front of the buyers? And I guess as a side question with that, is there any tech that can help with that? Gotta love some tech.
Oh my goodness. I mean, that's, we're definitely getting into sales enablement territory there. When we're taking very specific pain points that they've given us access to, and then we can sort of put the content in front of them.
Yeah.
I've seen the best performance in field marketing, especially, come from actually just asking your leads as they engage with your content. Ask them, like, what are you struggling with? Give them the chance to, as they opt in, give them the chance to tell us exactly what it is they're looking for. And then when that's done, you can ask them, did you actually get what you were looking for? Like, did this solve the problem you were trying to solve? So customer feedback is the best way to do this, or prospect feedback is the best way to do this. But you can get all kinds of great insights from intent platforms. You can get great insights from even social platforms. My agency is really focused on B2B social, so we've seen just from building really good retargeting audiences on certain problems of your website, problems that your website addresses, that gives you a head start on giving them the right content. So classic retargeting is good, but otherwise, I think speak to your customers. That's the best way to do it.
That's a bit of a shocking revelation. Type 1, actually speaking with people. Oh my God. I suppose you could avoid getting on the phone and do it by the keyboard, but what you're advocating there, by the sounds of it, is actually speaking with customers.
If it's possible, yeah. If they want to speak to you, it's the best way you can get information. Of course, that's not what a lot of people want to do. In fact, I think most buyers don't want to speak to you unless they've bought you, right? And in that case, I would say surveys are a really good way to do this. So people are actually very willing to give information on surveys. It's if it's easy for them to do, which surveys usually are, and if there's some reason for them to be doing it, then you'll get good results from that as well.
Nice. Hey, here we go. I was hoping someone would ask this, and I imagine that no discussion on the subject of funnels is possible without it. But Gamdan asks, what do you think of a system like Clickfunnels? There you go, right there.
So I haven't actually used Clickfunnels. I'm going to have to clarify my understanding here.
Okay.
I believe it is a system built for automating the digital journey that leads to conversion, right?
Yes, it's a SaaS funnel software, similar to. I can't think of any others. That happens when you're the market leader. You're like, well, what's the other name for a Hoover? I don't know. Hoover? Similar to Infusionsoft. I think they were one of the first people to do that. And then you had lead pages, for example.
Okay. So I think depending on the product you're trying to sell, but these are like the best version of funnels. I think this is the true funnel that actually performs in the way that it was meant to perform, because it's giving you predictable conversion rates. It's giving you like outputs based on how many clicks you put into it or how many impressions you feed it. There's a real predictable funnel there, and that's really good. I think the challenge with that is if you're trying to do B2B enterprise sales, if you have these really high value ticket sales with sales cycles between 6 and 12 months, then the interactions that lead to sale are not as easily measured or easily controlled as through something like Clickfunnels. So I guess it depends. In SaaS, this stuff is gold. It's absolutely amazing. But in a large ticket enterprise sale, let's say you're selling like cybersecurity or you're selling infrastructure, these kinds of sales cycles are multi-touch. A lot of them are offline, and a lot of them take place over 6 months. So unfortunately, we haven't cracked how to optimize the journey that's long. That is so long. I mean, over a couple of touch points, but I think that will improve over time as well.
Is that because that's actually venturing over then into ABM territory? I guess that might not be a fair question, because I'm putting a defined line between funnels and ABM. Or is that actually a fair question? What do you think?
That's a great question. I mean, ABM is supposed to, some people will say ABM, isn't that just good B2B marketing? And I would actually, I would agree. All good B2B marketing should have accounts as a dimension. You should be considering who's this account and why is the marketing relevant to them. And one of the big problems is that these accounts have very specific either tender stages. If you're in the public sector, you would be your ability to sell to them is very much dependent on external factors. And so taking on their account-based view, taking on a view of their account and their journey through the sales cycle is actually the best way to land a deal. So I would say ABM gives us the long view on an account that we need to solve that problem. That we can't track this through 5 or 6 clicks on a website.
Got it. Thank you very much. Okay, right. I'm just wondering if we've made the case perfectly clear, because I did like our title for today's show, which is what is your funnel lying to you? So for the sake of complete clarity, is there any other way that we need to be looking at this problem which you're on the case of explaining and clarifying?
How should we look? Yeah, I mean, I think we should always make our models as useful as we possibly can. Models are absolutely amazing, and that's what a funnel is. It's a model of reality. So I thoroughly believe we need to update our models. Like if you look at Google's research on this matter, they've actually built I'm going to try and illustrate this. I don't know if I'll do it.
Do it.
They've illustrated for what they're calling the messy middle of decision making, like a loop-de-loop that goes like that. And between these two arcs, which are possibly eternal, depending on how easy the decision is, there's evaluation and I can't even remember what do they call it. It's basically going out to fetch information and you're coming back to validate it. Exploration and evaluation.
Right.
These are the two loops, and I mean that's a really simplistic model, right? That's much more simple in its design than a funnel is, but it's actually closer to home because these leads aren't moving step, finish, and maybe even loyalty after that. They're moving between these sources of information and then the process of validating it. And if we can just think like that, if we can think more like their reality, then we're more likely to make good decisions about how we serve them content and how we design content to help them navigate that.
I think that's a really important point to make actually there, where I imagine traditionally we look at funnels, and I'm doing the funnel shape now so that you can understand what I'm doing. The mistake then, from what I picked up from this, is that we think that people move from the top level and then they go plonk, they're in the second one, and they carry out a task, whatever it is, and once they've achieved that singular task, plonk, they're then down to the next level. But as you're referencing Google's research there, that's not actually the case. People can be stuck in that level for an undeterminate amount of time. And that's what you're saying is where the problem lies. Is that correct?
I think so, yeah. And because they'll be going back from those as well. So if they were plonking, they would plonk back up again as well. And it's almost like the planets have to align. If you've got let's say you've got the requirements down, you've got you know exactly what your requirements are, and you know exactly what your problem is, but there's something changes on the vendor front, you have to make a couple of adjustments to your purchasing decision, right? And that's fine, that's not a big deal. But if your understanding of the problem itself changes, which is often what is changing with challenger brands, they come into the market and they say, you think you have this problem, but actually you have a completely different problem. And these are great brands. These are brands that are just disrupting the way that we solve problems. But every time they do that, they've also disrupted the entire decision-making process because now you have a new set of requirements. Right. And so and because there's so much information, this actually happens quite often. If you're a discerning buyer, you're out there doing your research, and every now and again you come to some source of information that just disrupts your process that you're trying to build. And what that means, and this is back to the looping, what that means is that you're never done until all of the buying jobs are in sync at the same time. And that's like the planets really have to align, and you have to be able to see down a straight line at the same time.
I like that. Your what do you call it? way of describing it, that the planets need to figuratively align.
Yeah, and the cats need to be running and is all that kind of stuff.
In a straight line. You know what? You've actually touched on something which I'd definitely not considered before, and that is the impact which a challenger into any sector or niche has. And I guess we've been conditioned to think that, a challenger coming in is a great thing, and they're going to, as a result, win new customers. But the side effects of that, as you just mentioned, is that it causes buyers to reconsider how they actually set about buying. That's really powerful, and I think a good heads up for marketers to take on board, actually.
Yeah, that's a good point. And something I haven't really thought about myself. Like, if you're challenging the status quo, how are you addressing what they were thinking about that status quo? Are you giving them the tools they need to then compare the new reality to the old one that they've just come out of? Definitely something to think about.
Crikey, the word triage springs to mind. There we go. So when a new challenger comes into the marketplace, then as a marketer, it's on you then to figure out how that's made a change, and how are you going to, counter that. I think that's really the case, and countering any changes made by competitors coming in. Nice. Right, well, with all of that said, what would you like as for the audience to have as a core takeaway from today? And in fact, I probably fair to me to say core takeaways, actually, because I think we've got more than one in here.
Oh, you're going to have to shut me up if I ramble here. But I think the big thing is, so we know buying is hard, and we know that we want selling to be easy. Mm-hmm. And it's really worth just focusing on making buying easy, because once buying is easy, selling is easy. When buyers can easily move through your funnel or flywheel or whatever model you're using, you're going to see better conversion rates, and you're going to see a much lower cost to acquire a new customer. So I think instead of trying to make our lives easier, we need to think about how can we make our buyers' lives easier. I think this is the big takeaway. It's like the big superpower. If you have empathy for your buyers that no one else has, you're going to solve their problems faster than other organizations are going to do. I don't think we're very good at this in B2B. I think we're much too focused on our own companies. We're not often thinking about our customers in the same way that a startup B2C company might be. So I think empathy is a superpower. It's definitely going to help us make good decisions here. And take all maps of reality with a pinch of salt. This is I'm very passionate about this. Maps are great, but you need to have no one would look at a map of no one would look at their GPS, right, and then see that, okay, well the road stops here, but actually there's a cliff beyond it, and then drive over the cliff, not asking any questions about what they've just done. Our maps are often leading us into dangerous territory because they've taken so much of the world out of what they're visualizing, and it's such a common human mistake. Like, we always think that the map that we look at, and this includes metrics, right? We think that MQLs are telling us that we're successful, but the MQL is nothing. MQL is just somebody that was forced to opt into your content to get to the information they needed. An MQL is not actually a buyer, and there are so many metrics we get hung up on, and those metrics are the map that we've painted for ourselves. This is not reality, and we need to really just keep pinching ourselves and saying, okay, well, these 100 leads that we think are stuck in our funnel, who are they really? Or are they just the people that needed to do a little bit of research around the problem they had?
Nice. I really like, by the way, that's you quantified why empathy is such a valuable commodity within B2B. It's I've noticed it's certainly you come across it a lot, particularly on LinkedIn right now, where everyone's saying, you need to show empathy of your customer, but you right there have put a point on why it's worth having, and why you need to, and what the benefit of it is. And the other thing, so the other thing you said then was when buying is easy, selling is easy. Is that the right way around?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, nice.
And I mean, I must say, for anyone who hasn't experienced this, when we were first talking, and you showed me the next steps on having this conversation that we're having now, that was the easiest experience of my life. That was like a hot knife through butter. And yeah, I think you've done this better than most companies I've seen. It was really wonderful. At some point I was like, well, I don't even care what this is about. I just want to do it because it's from a CX perspective, from a UX perspective. It was a treat, and I think that's so memorable. I've told people about it now. That kind of memorable experience that you can create for your buyers is it's brilliant, right? Definitely how you want
That's
to be remembered.
very cool. Thank you. So that everyone watching and listening understands what we're talking about right here. So I put a lot of effort into finding the right guests for the show who've got real value to share, and that involves hours and hours of trawling on LinkedIn. That's really cool to say. Thank you. Eben really liked the way that I'd put together the process to tell him what was involved, how it would take place, and what needs to happen. And in line with what you're saying there about just making it easy for buyers to make that decision, and how that has a happy end to the story in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Well, hey, Eben, I should probably ask you, right, how can people get in contact, and is there any recommended reading from you? So yes, how can they get in contact with you, and if they'd like your help, what should they do?
Okay. Well, if you are interested in this topic, I have a disgusting amount of research for you because I like to collect my sources. So you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I've got some stuff written there. I've also got just reach out to me. I've got so much to share if you're interested in that. And yeah, I would really recommend get behind the consultancies. So get behind the McKinsey's going through a tough time. Get behind the Forresters and the Gartners of the world, and they're doing a lot of leading edge research in this way. And often what they come up with only filters down to the rest of the market in 2-3 years. So analysts, they'll build these processes from what the consultancies are doing. But that's exactly when you should be putting into action the things that they're recommending, because that's when most marketers haven't done them. So, but anyway, follow me on LinkedIn if you want, or connect, and then we can talk from there.
Perfect, thank you. A late shout here. Kaushik Hindoka says, thank you very much, Eben, for your work this afternoon and inputs. Thank you very much, Kaushik.
Kaushik.
Nice one, dude.
Thanks for listening.
Cool. Well, hey, look, Eben, live from South Africa this afternoon. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. All right.
It was such a pleasure. Thank you, James.
Thank you, man. Right, and indeed, if you've enjoyed watching, then please do, if you're not already, subscribe to web address on screen, there you go, the414.net for all previous episodes, and to subscribe to the show, because we've gotten quite good now at doing the weekly email, so that you never miss an episode. And from this week, this is the first week we did it, we send out the link to join the live show before the day itself. It's not a new concept, but that's now a thing available on LinkedIn Live, and that's what we're doing each and every week. So the 414.net, bang, right there. The 414.net to subscribe to the show if you haven't already, and to watch all previous episodes. There you go, cool. Wow. The 414, live exclusive to LinkedIn Live. It's for you as a professional B2B marketer to directly expand and enhance your professional knowledge every single week. When I get to speak with some of the greatest and truly most interesting minds in B2B marketing. There we go. Well, my name's James Rostance. I will see you here same time next week.